This might be too cynical for you, but this is I believe, again, as we said earlier, I'm not an expert in history, although I have read more recent history. Certainly, I know nothing about ancient history, but I've read about the Russian Revolution and the Chinese Revolution and American Revolution. Like, I'm familiar with more recent history to some extent. There have Most of the population is always like this.
Yes.
They're always
Yes.
like this. You're not going to argue them or yell at them into using their own judgment to notice that the line is longer than the other lines or this line's shorter. Most of the population are conformists. They will look around the table, see what people are saying about the lines that they're given, and
They'll
parrot
conform.
back. Parrot back whatever's been said. They will conform, and they are easy to gin up to do. It's easy to gin them up to do that in the name of righteousness. So whether it's Pol Pot getting people to execute everyone with glasses because they must be smart and we don't want smart people, or they must be educated and educators are a problem, or whether it's Karens reporting on people for having New Year's Eve parties or screaming at people for not wearing masks. It's the exact same psychology, and that psychology for the large percentage of the population isn't going to change. And I don't want to sound defeatist, but that's the reality is we need to have a society in which those people do not have. This is why democracy fundamentally sucks. You don't want a society that's driven by those masses, because those masses are very easily manipulated by charismatic leaders and ideologues who can gin them up to push them in one direction or another.
Yeah. Well, I will say, just as an add-on to what you're saying about history, as I said earlier when we were talking about Hotep, whatever, I've only really been interested in reading about history for the 4 years or so since I left the social justice cult. And I've started with and have been focusing on history of, like what you're talking about, reading about the Soviet Union, reading about Nazi Germany, and trying to understand what it is that makes humanity so susceptible to getting pulled into this kind of collective evil where we go along with. Why do so many people go along with authoritarianism, whether that authoritarianism is communist or fascist, but it's totalitarianism. It's government control of people. Why do so many people go along with that? And that's the part of history I've been focusing on. I haven't been focusing on the stuff Hotep was talking about. I need to go back further, right? Ancient history is a totally different ballgame. But it doesn't take long when you start reading about that stuff. That's why I know a lot of these people haven't read any history, because it doesn't take long when you start looking at that these different horrific things that humanity has allowed to happen and even participated in. It doesn't take long to start to understand that a lot of it depends on you being manipulated by fear and by the belief that you're a good person.
Right.
These people think they're good people. That's what the friend of the friend said. We have to wear a mask. That's what good people do. You are not a good person. You go along with whatever you're manipulated. They pull your string and you go along like a little sheep. You don't give any thought to what you're doing. You probably can't even define what individualism is versus collectivism. You don't know what authoritarianism is. You use words like fascist, and if you were put on the spot and asked to define it, you couldn't. You're not a deep thinker. You are a lemming. You are in those, like, I know I mentioned it before, but if you look at the Asch conformity experiments, only 25% of people didn't conform. You are one of those 75%.
Right.
We must wear a mask. We must not open our businesses. That's what good people do.
And
it's robotic. It's robotic.
It is. I don't know that telling them that it's robotic will change them.
No, but they need to be shamed.
Sure. And again, this is an argument against universal suffrage, right? This is an argument against. It's an argument against democracy. It's an argument against letting those sheep have absolute power over law, because when they have absolute power, there's nothing preventing the manipulation. That it is easy, not easy, but it's totally possible to manipulate those sheep into doing whatever you want. And if they've got absolute power, that's how you end up with leaders whose name I won't mention after the Weimar Republic in Germany. And that's how you end up with Stalin. And that's how you end up with Mao. And that's how you end up with a lot of these horrible leaders. It's because you've got people that can be manipulated and they've got control. Maybe Mao's a bad example because there was no democracy there and even Stalin. But the first one is a prime example.